Hey guys, I'm Gracie. I'm from Highland Park United Methodist Church, and this is Kings and Queens.
Long live the king.
Long live Queen Elizabeth.
I've wondered if any of y'all's parents are chore people. Do they assign you guys chores? Like maybe you get the dishwasher one week and the next week you're supposed to do laundry, or maybe, honestly, maybe you're the sibling that gets away with not doing it at all. Growing up, I honestly was not assigned chores ever. Now, before you get jealous or outraged at that, I was not assigned chores, but I went ahead and did them anyway. I think that what my mom learned quickly was that if she assigned a chore, I would do it immediately, and my brother would forget, or he would not do it right, in my opinion, and I would go ahead and do his chore too. That's how chores worked at our house. I don't know if any of y'all work off of chore charts or that kind of thing, but that kind of defeated the purpose for teaching responsibilities at our house for in the chore, using a chore chart or being assigned chores. So I feel like our whole lives, though, we're being given responsibilities, just constantly being handed out responsibility after responsibility, just based on who we are as a student, as a daughter or brother or sister, as a 17-year-old with a driver's license. With every identity you have, you're given another responsibility. Maybe as captain of your team, or as elected member of student council, you carry more responsibility. Your teachers are telling you, as you go to college, you're going to have to be more responsible for this. Your college professors aren't going to stand for this. Or as captain of this team, you carry a lot more responsibility on your shoulders. And honestly, I wish I could say that these responsibilities are meaningless and we don't have to do them, but honestly, just responsibilities are just part of being alive. They're part of our identities as students and siblings and daughters and sons, and as Americans and as people who are healthy, we have the responsibility to socially distance ourselves or to wear a mask in public. What if I told you that as a Christian, you're also given another responsibility? Before you turn off this video because you don't want another responsibility, I'm going to invite you to hang on for a second, because I think you're going to like what you hear. Do you guys remember Peter? Peter was one of Jesus's disciples, and he might be one of our most beloved disciple. We can relate to Peter a lot in that Peter made a lot of mistakes as a disciple of Jesus, and what's ended up being really cool, though, is that Jesus continued to trust Peter. Jesus didn't let those mistakes get in the way, and Peter ended up being the leader of the church after Jesus ascended. And Peter, as a leader of the church, he wrote a lot of letters to different people. People wanted to know what Peter had to say. Peter wanted other people to know what he had to say about different things regarding this new Christian life that they were living. So in one of his letters, in 1 Peter, in chapter 2, leading up through chapter 2, Peter talks about the importance of living a holy life. And when I say holy, I'm talking Holy, a holy life, living a life that's set apart, that's different, that's consecrated, that looks different from everybody else's. And in chapter 2, verse 9, Peter says this to the people he's writing. You are a chosen race, a holy priesthood, a holy nation, and a royal priesthood, God's own people, in order that you may proclaim the mighty acts of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Now, these words are beautiful and flowery and fancy, but Peter didn't actually come up with all of these words. He's citing a verse from Exodus, and anybody who was Jewish who was reading this letter, they would pick up on that immediately. They would know that these are the words that God told Moses about Israel, that Israel was a holy nation. They were set apart. They were to be a royal priesthood, just like Peter is saying now. So the people receiving this letter, about living holy lives, not to live like Gentiles, to live a different life, Peter finally just spells it out for them. After saying all these different things, Peter says, here's the deal. If you don't get it by now, this is why you should live a holy life. Because you are a holy nation. You are a royal priesthood. You are chosen. You are different. It was just like how Israel was chosen and set apart by God in the Old Testament, but now Christ has chosen and set us all apart to be part of this holy and royal priesthood. Now, the people that he's writing, they're nobody special in particular. They're not, necessarily these political figures or famed athletes. They're just, your regular merchants and weavers and farmers and brothers and sisters. They're nobody holding any particular special role. But Peter says, actually, you're a member of the royal priesthood. And that role, that adds some new responsibility to their lives. This kind of reminded me, hearing this phrase, royal priesthood, and having Peter tell these just normal people that they are members of that. It made me think of the scene in Princess Diaries when Mia, spoiler alert, but if you haven't seen it, I mean, you should have by now. But Mia finds out that that her dad was a prince, and she literally tells her grandmother, "Shut up." She is shocked that she is the princess of Genovia. It also, if Princess Diaries isn't your thing, it also makes me think of Harry Potter when Hagrid comes to a little 11-year-old Harry and he says, "You're a wizard, Harry." And in the movies, Harry stutters and he's like, "I can't be a wizard. I'm just Harry." And the thing is, their reactions are so priceless because they're speechless. They have just been given this news about their identities that has completely changed the course of their life. Because these new identities they've realized, oh my gosh, these identities have just given me a whole lot of responsibility. And friends, this is exactly what Peter is saying. You're not just Harry. You're a royal priest. You're a member of the royal priesthood. And that takes on a lot of responsibility. And if you were like me, you're thinking, okay, well, what exactly does a royal priest do, Peter? That would be really helpful information. Peter says that it's so that we may proclaim the mighty acts of him who has called us out of darkness and into light. Now, does that mean that we're all supposed to go be preachers and evangelists and standing on street corners shouting Bible verses at people? I don't think so. I think that there's a lot more responsibilities that a priest has, that Peter's referring to, that he knows the people who are hearing this, they would know that priests have these roles. So the priests that Peter's talking about are the priests of the Old Testament. They're not the priests that we imagine today who wear the white collars and don't get married and, are in Catholic churches. No, these are Old Testament priests. They are different. And the main thing that the role of these priests do is that they are a mediator between God and Israel. And they are set apart of the nation that's set apart. They are called to be holy. They're expected to live to a level of holiness and purity. Just like that's why God calls Israel a royal priesthood, because they are also called to live a holy life, set apart, to look different from the people around them. See, the priests that Peter was referring to, they represented God to Israel, and they represented the people's needs, Israel's needs, back to God. They would speak for God through interpreting scripture, through helping people when they would come to them with advice, asking what would God want me to do. The priest could offer that advice. The priest could also help them atone for their sins through sacrifice, and that's how the priests would reflect the needs of the people back to God. Do you see how priests were the mediators between God and Israel, between God and people? How he brought God to people and people to God? This is a huge responsibility. The priests carried a huge responsibility. But this is not a responsibility that we're called to do on our own. That's why it's a royal priesthood. Because together we are called to represent God to the people, to the world. And we are called to represent the world's needs back to God. So the responsibility is just too big to do on your own. If you're intimidated, then you get it, because it's a huge responsibility. But the beauty is that it's not your responsibility alone. We're doing this. We're called, everybody who calls Jesus their Savior is called to this priesthood, to represent God to the people, and to represent people's needs back to God. Doesn't it seem like, though, now the world needs this more than ever? If you're like me, you're kind of struggling to find God. Where is God? Where is God showing up in the midst of this pandemic, in the midst of people losing jobs, in the midst of people going hungry, and in the midst of people getting sick? There's so many things that have been affected by this virus. I think God needs his representatives to show people where he is and who he is. This world is hungering for God. But more importantly, maybe, is that we can represent the people's needs back to God. The world has so many needs right now, just countless. I'm sure you have have heard prayer requests in the past couple days, or talked about all the needs of the world in your community and around the country. The world needs us to intercede and to pray and represent those needs to God. It's where we come in. It's our job to be the representatives to God of the people. We can show the people in the grocery store grace for getting a little less than 6 feet from us. Maybe it's when we give our unopened foods or buy supplies for people who can't afford it right now. And we love our neighbors by socially distancing from them so that we don't put them in harm's way. We're representing God to people in these ways, and we sacrifice our time by praying for people. We sacrifice our time by making masks. Maybe you and your family have started making masks for your neighborhood hospitals. But I think most importantly, we listen to the people's needs. We listen to the world's needs. And we hear what is it that they need from God and how can God help them. We bring those needs to God. It's our responsibility. As royal priests, that's our responsibility. Now, it can be overwhelming, but we're not alone. You're not doing this alone. If you're becoming overwhelmed from just seeing all the needs in the world, reach out to your pastor, your small group leader, your friends, people in your small group, and remind them that we are all in this together and that we are all called to this responsibility. It's not something we can do on our own. The world has a lot of needs, but we are in this together, and we are called to this responsibility together. So now enjoy your small groups or life groups, or whatever you call them, and we will see you guys next week with Kings and Queens.